Perfect. So today's topic will be PCF tips and tricks. Some of you are maybe new to PCF development. This session would be for you because some of the tips may be obvious to the veteran guys that started on day one, but for the new ones, they're not maybe too obvious, and you will see what you can do with them. Okay, let's start with the who am I request, or as I was corrected, this must be who am I response, but it's fine. Okay, I'm a software developer based in Zagreb, Croatia. I'm fairly new Microsoft MVP, less than a year. I'm working in a consultancy called Span that is focused on Microsoft technologies, and I'm working in BizApp space for 5 years now. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on my blog, dynamicsninja.blog, or just drop a message on my Twitter handle Dynamics Ninja if you have any questions around PCF or development on Power Apps in general. Okay, let's go with a countdown. First thing first, so tooling. Everybody is familiar that you need some prerequisites for PCF development. So you need to have Node.js, npm, and the editor of your choice. But my preference would definitely be Visual Studio Code because it has everything you need to start your development. And the last thing, of course, is Power App CLI that will scaffold your project and help you test, debug stuff, and also publish it on your environment. But there are also good tools around in community that can help you to kickstart your PCF development process. So let's name a few. So first one is the PCF Builder. It is the earliest tool, so it was created first, that allows you to visually execute all the commands that are available in CLI. So for example, you want to create a new solution, just fill out the form, click create, and you're ready to go. They're all commands integrated in this tool. So if you want to test it, build it, deploy it, you name it, this tool have it. So if you're a visual type, and I know that most of the guys out there like UIs, graphical UIs, it's definitely tool to look on and start your PCF development with. The second one is the PCF Builder, also as the first one built by Danish. It's a extension for Visual Studio Code that will help you run all the commands by executing the predefined commands in Visual Studio Code. So you just open the command bar in Visual Studio Code, type PCF, and you will see all the commands available there, and you can just execute it by pressing enter, and boom, you have the dialog that will help you to initialize your solution or build. You can just press enter and build your component. And the last one I want to talk about is the tool created by myself. It's a PCF generator. I found that the out of the box CLI for initializing the solutions is missing some things. Maybe people don't get everything as a template so they can start their development. For example, where to put CSSs, where to put images, how to use translation files, which packages do I need to start development with React and Fluent UI? How do I initialize the solution? I democratized all that process by creating this tool. You just type yo PCF and it will open the wizard for you. It will ask you some questions, as you can see: control namespace, which packages do you want, publisher prefix, name. And when you input all the data, it will create the complete solution for you with all the goodies: CSS templates, resx templates, solution pre-initialized, and you can just build it and push it to your environment, and you have already working control by your own. Okay, that's all about the tools. Let's go to the next one. The next one is make your controls intuitive. Why is that important? If you just go with a pack in it and leave everything as it is, you will end with something like this. So it's called fancy control with no spaces. If you see, there is a description down there that is just saying description, nothing handy to get from it. Also, the fields, the default name is property display key and the property description key. That's not a way we want to make our controls. We want to make it more intuitive. And what do we need to do? The first thing that users ask themselves: how do I use this? Because if I didn't make a description for the field, maybe it's not intuitive in that way. When I first when on the first time when I see it, maybe I don't know what to input there. It's simple string field, but what should I input in it? So spend your time on manifest file. Make your control and property nodes look prettier, as I suppose. Make all the description fields important. So describe what your control does, what the field does, because users will be very thankful, especially end users, citizen developers that will use your control. That's so important. Complex controls, if you have, for example, JSON configuration line, so you have a property that you will input some JSON in it, you can't describe this into the description field because it will be so large. People will not be able to read it inside the configuration. Make a documentation. Most of the controls are open source on GitHub. Just pop up a README file and make a documentation for your control so people can know how to use it. I had a struggle with more than few controls where there were JSON inputs, but what do I type in that JSON? What do I need to input in the JSON property? I don't know. Maybe it's an enum, maybe it's a number. Tell us what you want to put us in. And less characters, but more info. That's the key thing. You don't need to make that description too large. Just point us to the key things that you want us to know about your field, control, whatever. Just make it easy for us when we are configuring it. Okay. And at the end, it will look like this. So spacing in the naming, in the description, control then makes this text red. It's enough if it's basic control. For the properties, okay, we will have a text value here, and what is this text value? It's a value of our text field that we are bound to. It's pretty easy, but I've seen a lot of controls, they don't have the right descriptions. Some of them even have the original default values set by the CLI. That's not how you do it. So please use the text inputs. Okay, so let's go on a third one. Preview image. People are visual types. We get attention by pictures. So when I browse through the controls available on my environment, I will maybe know exact name that I want of the control. But if I don't know the name, I will search through the list and look for the pictures, because the first thing I will see will be the picture. If I scroll through and go with arrows up and down, I will see the picture. Make that picture describe your control too. For maybe you could use GIF. If you use GIF, you can uh, make a better UX experience, because people will see what your control is doing in action. Just few frames, never mind. Just use the picture and show the user what your control is like on that picture, or maybe a GIF. So at the left side, it's a default icon. When you have that icon, please use some preview icons. Like on the right, it's saying preview icon. You, of course, it's bad to use this kind of icon, but make yourself an icon, a screenshot or something, and put it here. It will be much better for the end users. So as I said, people are visual types, but you need to take care of dimensions. That picture, as you can see on the right, has the dimensions. I tried to put 100 by 100 picture inside, and you can see that 100 by 100 is a square picture, but it is stretched to the max dimension that the configurator is using. So those dimensions are 117 by 130 pixels, and that's the ratio that you need to use when you're thinking about your preview images. Otherwise, if you don't use it, it will be stretched in both directions, both height and width. So it will be modified and it will not look pretty when the user sees. So take care of the ratio. The ratio is the most important. So 70 by 30 ratio is the key part here. Uh, how can we use that preview image? It's nice and easy. It's not included in the template given by Microsoft. In control node, you just need to add a preview image, set the name of your image, so actually the path to your image that you want to show in the control. You don't need to do anything else, just add this attribute to the control node and you're ready to go. You don't need to add it in a resource node, just like you do for the images you will use in your code. No, just make it visible there in the control node and you're fine to go. So people are visual types, use preview images. I didn't, maybe 90% of the images out there are not set. They are default. So please, people, use that preview images. Also a tip here, if you're using preview images with Canvas apps controls, it will break your control in import. So if you import the control in Canvas, it will eventually break. I know that the fixes in the release train, it will be available soon. Maybe it's available now. I didn't try it on Canvas today, but that will be fixed soon. So use preview images. Fourth tip is localization. I'm not a person that I want to use my apps on my local language. So I don't use apps in Croatian, but I'm assured that there are many people in the world that they're using controls and applications in general in their own language. So why should we limit our controls only to English or only to one language? Make it multi-language. And how can we do that? There is a resx file that is basically an XML that defines all the values for your all the values of the strings that you will use in your control translated to some language. Uh, but resx file is not enough by its own. You must know the language code ID. So it's shown LCID. That's the unique code for every language in the world. If you know that code, you will instruct your control which language to load, which language strings do you want to load to your control. But how do I know which language code is for each language. There are dozens of resources where you can find the LAC ID code for the language, but the best thing I suggest is I made a sub-generator in my Yeoman generator that will just allow you to say yo PCF RSX, and it will show the list of the languages you want. You just pick one language, hit enter, and the RSX file will be created for you. That way you don't need to remember all those codes that you use in your normal work. Okay, so think about users. Users maybe don't know the English. Maybe they're from some country that English is not well spoken. So make opportunity for people to contribute to your control by just adding the translations. They don't need to add a code. They just need to translate some strings and upload it to your GitHub, and control will now have another dimension for those peoples. If you open the RSX, it's shown on the right. It looks pretty scary at the first time when you see it, but the all it's XML file at the end. So if you're familiar with XML, it's easy to use because only the parts at the bottom are used to translate the strings. There are two levels where you can use your translations. One is configuration, so all the things you input in the manifest will be shown in that language in the configuration. The other level is control UI. All the strings that you want to use on the runtime, uh, you put in your code. You just pick a string with that key, and it will be shown in the language of the current language where you load your control. As I said, you need to know language code, LACID, for every language, or use Yeoman generator to generate the right RSX file for you. So think ahead. Don't make controls without RSX files, because maybe sometime in future you will need to add a translation and you will need to refactor all the things in your control. So think ahead, make your life easier in the future. And now I will just stop the presentation and open Visual Studio Code to show you the things I was talking of. Okay, first, the tooling. Okay, I'm using Visual Studio Code, but you can use any editor out there. I like Visual Studio Code because I have everything here. How to use, I was talking about the niche tool, PCF builder. Oh, sorry. Now I forgot. Yeah, I'm total lockdown. I forgot how to pop up. Okay, here you go. If you hit Control Shift P, you will get that command window where you can execute the commands. For example, if you type PCF, you have all the PCF related commands here with a Visual Studio extension made by not made by Danish. For example, you want to initialize component, just press enter, and you will have, you see, a dialog that will guide you through the process how to initialize your control. That's one way how you can initialize your control. The other thing you can do is open your XRM toolbox, search again for PCF builder, and you have the interface here. As I talked, if you're a visual type, you can input all the details here, run the commands just by clicking it here, initialize your solution, and anything you want to do with CLI, you can do just by clicking some of the options here in the tooling. And it's really cool for everyone that are starting. I think if you don't know what to do, you can just click around and play with it. Okay. And the third tool was Yeoman Generator that was made by myself. So you open the command line, type yo PCF, and that Yeoman guy will pop up and ask you some questions. Okay, for example, here is control namespace. The default value is in the braces. So if I click enter, it will just go through with default values. If you click OK, I want field, I want to use React plus Fluent UI. Okay, it's publisher prefix, publisher name. Boom. And now the generator will start doing stuff in the background. It will create, initialize the project, create the dependencies. Okay, I need to overwrite the package JSON. Yes, overwrite everything. And when it's done, it will start npm install and ms build for you. But if we open the folder, we can see that most of the things you get with pack init command in command line, but here you see, for example, it initialized solutions for a folder for you. You don't need to know how to initialize that solution. It will update all the values, of course, for you. It will make the basic structure. So you have a CSS. It will include a sample CSS that will guide you how do you need to make your CSSs. So prefix all the CSS classes as your namespace plus control name to make it work, to don't conflict with others. It will include some preview image that will be used in your manifest. I was talking that the initial pack command doesn't add preview image. It will add preview image for you. You just need to replace the preview image in this folder to make it work. It also initializes the string for RSX file for English, and you can just jump into development and code your component. You don't need to know what do I need to start development. It's already there for you. Okay, so let's jump into Visual Studio Code to show some other things. Okay, so the first thing is control manifest. If we open the control manifest, I was talking about the display name key, so the naming. Please type something here to get attention of your user. Why I'm not using the actual strings here, because it's using that RSX files here. So include this English RSX file is included for you with Yeoman Generator. And if we go to that RSX, so it's located in strings, this is for English, this one is for creation. Okay, if we open up English version, we just scroll to the bottom and we'll see the keys here. So control name key, this is control name key. If we open that control and in an English environment, we will see the text, fancy text control. Also for description and for both of the properties. And at the bottom, it's a placeholder text. So we have some text input in our control, and we want to make that value also dynamically generated for us depending on the language. So we are now trying to fetch string for the language that we are using. So we want to fetch text input string for the English language on the runtime. So when we executed the control, this placeholder text will be fetched dynamically from our RSX file, and now we can set that placeholder to our input and use it as it is there. Okay. So I covered, just a quick reminder. Okay, tools, preview images, localization. Okay, sorry. Okay, that's background noise, I suppose. Okay, that's how you set your localization. Let's go to the next one. So React and Office Fabric. Okay, so most of the controls today are made with React and Office Fabric. Why is that so? Because Microsoft is making their controls with React and Office Fabric, and that's the right way to do it. I will talk that when should you not use them later on, but the general thing is don't reinvent the wheel, use those things. The Office Fabric is now transitioning to Fluent UI, and more controls are natively imported into Power Apps and Dynamics. With Fluent UI, you don't need to make any CSS adjustments. You just use them, and you will have the same look and feel like they're the same as other components in the app. Okay, so why would you use React? The main feature is virtual DOM. When you are making things with JavaScript and generating your DOM, you always generate the DOM completely your DOM. You don't just manipulate DOM part by part. Only the things that are changed must be changed. That's what React does for you. The term is virtual DOM, and it's a really good thing because rendering is heavy operation. If you are rendering just the part of the DOM, it's a lot quicker. The future of React and PCF will be virtual controls. In the other words, it will allow you to include your controls directly into virtual DOM of the Power Apps application. At the moment, when you pack your control, you always pack the whole React, the whole Office Fabric in your control, and you load it on your form. If you have two controls, you load twice much of that. So at the moment, it's bad, but it will become much better in future. Learning React is a win-win situation because all the front-end stuff now in Power Apps is done in React, and if you learn React, you will just uh, quickly hop on the next wagon, the next big thing on Microsoft if you know React already, because it's their go-to front-end stuff. Get the power-ups look and feel. That's why you would need to use Office Fabric, because you can see on the right, those controls are familiar with you because you see it every day in your applications and Power Apps. So if you don't need to reinvent the wheel, you just use the pre-built control. For example, calendar. It has the Office Fabric UI. It has a calendar that exposes lots of features out there. For example, minimum, maximum date, or what do I do when I click on date, when I open the calendar. All those events are exposed to you, and you just need to add the logic to it to work it properly. And as I said before, the UI on Power Apps is transitioning completely to Fluent UI. At a moment, you need to make CSS adjustments on your controls, but in future, I feel that you will just pop in control and it will have the exact styling as any other control in Power Apps. Okay, this was the fifth one. And sixth one is third-party libraries. If we talk about third-party libraries, React and Office Fabric are third-party, but they're acquired by Microsoft. So I made a exclusive tip to those. But what I had a problem when I started developing PCFs, I was not that familiar with the modern front-end development. and I was coding everything by myself. I was doing npm install only when I need to initialize my component, pull all the dependencies, and that was my npm work. I never pulled any other third-party libraries, and that's really bad because there are a lot of third-party libraries that are doing useful stuff out there. But since I was not familiar that much with Node, I didn't know that. I'm familiar with NuGet when I'm doing .NET development. I use a lot of NuGet packages, which are more or less the same thing. They are packages for backend development, and here in front end you have npm, and you should definitely use npm and all the modules that are there on the npm. npm must be your friend when you're developing your controls. You need to implement some crazy feature. Look at the npm. There is already, I'm 100% sure, already npm module that does just this right thing for you. But think about overloading. If you're loading a lot of npm modules inside your project, you must think that they will be bundled with your control. And the more and more you it will become bigger, less performant and stuff. So think about overloading, and please, when you don't need, so you're testing some npm modules, you install it and forget to uninstall it. Please uninstall it on the project level, and you will thank yourself later because you will not have performance problems in future, and the size of your project can be really huge if you include all sorts of npm modules inside. Use it wisely because anybody can push anything on the npm. It's almost auto approved. I said it's like Kinder Surprise for you. You never know what you will get. Like when you do npm install on the initialized project for PCF, it will just bombard you with all kinds of npm modules that will be brought in to your project. But you must need what you've imported to your project to make it work better. Okay, that was on third-party libraries. Let's go on framework APIs. Uh, Framework exposes a lot of APIs. So if something is not working out of the box, probably you have some APIs for it. Uh, it's exposed by framework. Just you type context dot, and you have all sorts of uh, out of the box exposed functions by framework that you can use. For example, we have the most obvious one maybe, but also people don't use it that much. Imagine you have a single line of text control that you want to be disabled if the field is disabled on the form. It's not handled by itself. You need to instruct the control to do it. There is one property called mode, and if you go mode dot is control disabled, it will result in true or false, depending on in which state your control is. The same goes with field level security. If you want to obscure the input to your user, you need to fulfill that field level security thing. So you go to parameters, your property, for example, text value, here value, go to security and property readable. It will also be true or false, and if it's true, it will be available to user. If false, you need to obscure the input to your user. A trick for complex controls, if you have a big control, so massive control that does some crazy logic, has tons of elements, how to um, block the user to input in that. Okay, you can use is control disabled, of course, but you can put those in any kind of element. For example, on text field on date picker, you can, but when you have like crazy drag and drops or something, you need to um, disable that. And how can you do that? You just put an overlay, big overlay over your control that will block the clicks on the control beneath it. And I saw it on few controls and it's doing really great stuff. People don't maybe get it on first, but when somebody talks about it, you will get, yeah, that's a good idea. I will use it. At the end, explore the framework APIs. There are lots of things that you can get from the framework itself. For example, you can get formats that your user is using, for example, date format. You can easily get date format for your user that you can then inject in your date picker control to show the right format of the date. So there are lots of APIs. Look for them. And now the interesting part that I saw yesterday that a lot of people are asking is debugging. How can you debug the PCF controls? You can debug it via harness that's presented by Microsoft, but it has some problems. When you push it to org, it takes time. When you try to implement asynchronous calls, it will look like gibberish in your bundle.js file. If you want to call web APIs, you will get only some crazy mocks that are not usable. So if you need to focus on the data, you need to actually deploy it in on environment and test it there with real data returned by the system. Okay. And how to do that? There is definitely a better way to do it. Because all these limitations, you can debug everything in the harness. Complex controls were 100% sure impossible to debug in harness. Something will break. You need to do something better to test them. And the time-consuming imports are the big issue here because if you want to debug it on the environment, you need to import and re-import. And every time you make changes, you need to re-import your control to the environment. That's time consuming. Don't do that. What's the key thing here? Use Fiddler. Telerix Fiddler allows us to use autoresponder feature, which is basically you instruct the browser to take your local file instead of your file deployed to the instance. It's maybe a hard start to start, but it's a huge productivity boost. You don't need to make mocks and crazy stuff around it. You just configure the fiddler, build your tool, and you will have the right version, the new version in your browser just by making a quick refresh and you're good to go. The other thing is using source maps. If you have a React control that has multiple classes all around, it's maybe hard to debug just only bundle.js that's uh, provided to you when you import a solution. You maybe want to debug through the original files and jump between the files. It's better to view something in a small chunk of code that you exported to the class, and that's why you use source map in combination with Fiddler to get this thing working. Okay, I will now jump to the demo part to show you how you can debug uh, those in Fiddler. First thing you need to do is go to node modules in your project. All the way down, you're gonna find PCF. Oh, I'm blind. PCF scripts. Okay, so PCF scripts, and then you go to webpack config. Okay, inside you will see some configuration, but the key point here is DevTool. You need to instruct your webpack to pack control that way that you will use source maps that will instruct how to map that bundle.js to the original files. So that's the first thing you need to do in order to use the source maps. The second thing here is you go to tsconfig and add this line, source map equals true. This line tells the compiler when it creates bundle.js from TypeScript that you want to include the source map, that the source maps will be generated also. And how does it look like? When you build a control, so let's say I hit npm run build, and I will go to out folder and see what do I have here. So I have bundle.js file, which has all the bundle code. But if you build it in the release, you will have minified code. So one liner here that is unreadable. Looks like gibberish to me. Okay. But there is also bundle.js map file that will do the trick for you, that will know how to map the now we need to instruct the Fiddler how to include this. The important thing to mention, when you deploy your control, by default, bundle.js is not going to your environment because it's containing the original code. It's maybe double the size. So what do we need to do here? Deploy our control. Fine. We have our control on the environment. And now we need to open Fiddler and see the configuration there. So I thought I have Fiddler open, but no. Maybe it will take some time to open. I hope we'll have it soon. It's opening on another screen. I will bring it when it's opened. Okay, here we go. So first thing, make sure you are capturing the traffic. When you're capturing the traffic, the autoresponder will kick in. You need to add a rule. Just add a rule, add a new rule. This is the main part that you need to do. So your file will be named bundle.js.map, and all you need to do is point your Fiddler to the export of your control. So out folder, as I showed here, has a bundle.js. Point the Fiddler to that file. Okay, now here is the file. And if everything is working, you can open your browser to test it. I open the Fiddler now. The first thing you need to do to make sure that it will work is to clear the cache, because in most cases, if you don't clear the cache, Fiddler will not fetch the latest version, and you will not see the magic behind it. Okay, so open the terminal and right click, empty, and cache and refresh. Okay, I will just bring the console up there just to see it on the same screen. Okay. Oh, that refresh is like yesterday, going crazy slow. But let's go to sources to see what do we have on our environment. Okay, the refresh is kicking in. If we see the refresh going on, come on, you can do it. We'll see all the resources on our left, but it's so freaking slow. I don't know, maybe because the team recordings is on. Awkward silence while we wait. Okay, now we start seeing something here, but not fast enough. I hope I'll finish in time because of this. But I really wanted to show because that's a huge productivity boost if you use it that way. You don't need to use sitemaps with autoresponder. You can just make your bundle.js file. If you build in debug configuration, you just put the bundle.js file on your rules in autoresponder, and you can be able to debug your local file on the application. You don't need to use source maps, but if you have a complex application, it's better to use with source maps, so you can see all your original files. Okay, if we go to web resources, or here's our control, fancy text control as I named it, you see the bundle.js. If I open the bundle.js, I will see the minified version of the file that I cannot debug. So I need to, okay, let's close this so you didn't see it before. And click Control P and search for our index.ts, index.ts. And you'll see some PCF tools, something with some GUID. Click on that and you'll see that you have your TS file inside the debugger. But how is that possible? If you click on the reveal in sidebar, you will see that on the bottom there is some node that is a source map presented for you in a tree view. So in source map, it's defined that you have two TS files. So if I click on a text box helper, I will see the exact TS file that I have in my Visual Studio. And for example, now I want to make breakpoint here, and that text box helper is called here. So if I refresh the thing, and I'm afraid to press a refresh now because it was loading so long last time. But when you refresh the page and the command is executed, you will hit the breakpoint in the original file. And imagine how easy it is to debug the TS file instead of bundle.js, which can be minified, which can be uglified, or so all sorts of things. So you're on a production, you have a bug that is data related, and you want to debug it there. Just go inject the bundle.js map to your production control by Fiddler and debug it on production, and you will find the bug quite easily because you will go step by step through your files that you are familiar with. And that's a really cool thing that most of the people are not using, but I think after this one, you will start using it because it's so much easier, and you can do anything in Harness regarding web APIs and stuff. You should definitely inject the code to your environment and debug it there. This is taking ages, and I have 10 more minutes. Let's wait a second or two because I see that the key parts are loading. When we, okay, come on, placeholder text. Okay, we hit the breakpoint. It will open us the TS file. It's frozen. E index. No, it's called textbooks helper. Oh, here it is. So we hit a breakpoint. It's a bit slow today, but you see that we have a breakpoint here. We can go inspect the variables. Okay, here's our input. Here's our string that was passed to that function. Oh, sorry. Okay, here's the string, and that way you can debug your control. Really cool and handy thing. I hope you will use it in future. Let's jump back to the presentation to wrap it up with a few last tips. Sorry. Oh, and now my screen is frozen. Okay. I can't. It's so delayed. I don't know what to press. Okay, performance. If we want to talk about performance, the most important thing here is use production build. If you're building your solution, packing your solution, please use MS build configuration release because it will minify the code. It will make it a lot smaller. And if you have a lot of components on your form loading, it will be a huge performance boost on your form. And now we can talk about two types of controls. Let's say microcontrols. That are controls that are used on multiple fields on the form or just multiple grids or something. So multiple controls on the grids. They have simple logic used multiple times. But should we use frameworks there? Because as I said before, you're packing the whole React, the whole Fluent UI on every single control. And imagine if you have 10 controls loading the whole React and Office Fabric on your form. It is a total disaster. It's disastrous. So consider if your control should be used multiple times on the form. If not, it's okay to include frameworks, but if it will be used, then maybe using framework is not the best case. But if you make a huge controls that are binded to multiple fields, that are maybe a single control for the whole page, then you should definitely use frameworks because only one React or any kind of framework will be loaded on your form, and that's the way of how you do it. But in the future, when we get virtual controls, we'll inject our controls in virtual DOM. We'll not have that issue anymore. Until then, make a choice if your control will be micro control with simple logic or a huge control and act accordingly. Of course, you can use frameworks if you want, but think about performance at the end. And the last one is don't hack. It's a popular thing in the community. Should we do or should we not do unsupported things? I would say try at least to not use it because unsupported is bad. Microsoft didn't expose some things because they don't think that it's suitable enough for production. Maybe sometimes it will break something and they didn't expose the things by the framework. You can use it, for example, if you are using Web API, you don't see execute command there. You can just cast your object to any and use the execute method. Scott yesterday said that he's using it on a daily basis and it's working, but it's not exposed by Microsoft. If you can avoid doing some of those, but if you can't, just use them. I saw that some people are using XRM page. You should not use XRM page because all the things you want to pass to the control must be passed through the parameters uh, from the defined in manifest. So if you need multiple fields but bind only to one, don't do that by just binding to one and got all the other fields by XRM page. I saw it on few places. That's not the way to do it. If you want, if you can get that some kind of values from your parameters or control or framework itself, use Web API. If you need to fetch any configuration entity in the system, use Web API to fetch that data. Explore the framework docs. I saw that most of the people are not familiar with all the functions exposed by framework. Go through the docs and see maybe there is a function that is returning just the right value for you and you are hacking the way to get it at a moment. Just go through the docs. Maybe there is something that can help you. Most of the things will eventually be available in the future. Post those stuff in idea section in the community. PCF team is looking on them. They prioritize requests by the community. Most of the features that are top voted on the community were released in one of the releases. And in the end, it will all pay off in future because eventually they will release the feature. They will completely change the metadata beneath it, and you will need to refactor all the code just to fix that. And imagine if you have a lot of controls that you're hacking around, how big is that code base that you will need to fix? So my advice is don't hack if you don't need to, but if you need to, make it as small chunk as possible, only for those things that you cannot achieve with the PCF, or in that case, use web resources and do whatever you want. Okay, with that being said, I will end my session. Thanks everyone for coming. Don't forget to fill out the survey, and we can start with questions if there are any in the chat.
Thanks once again, Ivan. That was a very, very comprehensive session that you've covered there. A lot of people just giving their feedback saying it's a really good session and thanks for sharing about Fiddler. There was one question about a tool. Yeah, again, lots of positive feedback saying thanks for that session. Really good content that you've covered. There was one question I saw earlier related to a tool. I'm just trying to find it again in the questions window. So let's see. There we go. Do you know of a nice tool, preferably S-code extension, to edit regex files without having to adjust XML directly?
I'm not using by myself any tools. I tried some online versions, POC editor, I think it's called, that is free to 1,000 strings or something like that. But basically, all the things you do is just edit the bottom part and add the nodes at the bottom. And yeah, I know it will be much easier via some graphical tool, but I'm not using any tools. I tried some, but I was not happy. It was like just an overhead when I need to input the string. I usually don't have that many strings that I need to do it in a graphical way.
Great stuff. So that looks like just lots of good feedback, lots of positive sentiments from the whole community saying that it was really, really good, just what they were after. So once again, thanks again, Ivan. Remember, everyone, you can vote for your favorite session/speaker. Please, please, please fill out the surveys. We want to award prizes to the speakers as well as to the attendees. So, so Danish has actually shared that link in the chat window. So please